Corey Brown from the Hawkeye of the Storm, fresh off trip over to Iowa City for Iowa Football Media Day. It's the best time of the year as we get set for the season ahead. And a few notes for you before Kids Day tomorrow. We've got the open scrimmage at Kinnick. We'll be back there in Iowa City tomorrow, but wanted to kind of give you a brief recap and some of my takeaways from today's events. And of course, we got to talk to Kirk Ferentz. We talked to several assistant coaches. All of them were available. All the primary assistants were available for the media, and of course, players on the football field for pictures and for interviews. It was a fun day over in Iowa City. So a couple notes, first of all, from Kirk. I thought Kirk was rather upbeat today. You kind of have to read between the lines. He's not going to be all doom and gloom at this point, 8 practices into the season. He made a point of saying that. I should say 8 practices into fall camp. He made a point of saying, look, we're only 8 practices in. Knock on wood, we are pretty healthy. He did mention a few soft tissue injuries, but I think that's my biggest takeaway from today, folks, is it appears that the injury bug has not yet hit Iowa. Now, it may not, and that would be great. Injuries, of course, are part of football. They have had some soft tissue issues. Joe Labus has been out since July. That was a notable thing. Of course, he was listed as the backup to Cade McNamara entering fall camp. I think it's pretty clear that it's likely going to be Deacon Hill. If you look at the history of how Kirk treats a situation with injuries, Deacon looked like the front runner for that backup role in the spring. Now with Joe Labus being out for an extended period of time, I would expect Deacon Hill to be the backup, although I did have a very good conversation with Marco Lainez. And of course, we've had Marco on the show a couple of times. I'm real excited about his future. And Marco, great attitude. He's having a terrific start to his Hawkeye career. He's got an opportunity to perhaps be that third string quarterback if Labus is not available. And he's got a good head on his shoulders to be able to possibly be in that position. Hopefully they never have to go to the third guy this season. But my guess, assuming Labus is going to continue to be down and we weren't really given any significant update on his status, I would venture to say you're going to see, obviously, McNamara at 1, Deacon Hill at 2, and probably Marco Lainez as the third string quarterback heading into the season, assuming Labus is not healthy. Now, one common denominator we heard from Kirk, along with Abdul Hodge and the rest of the coaching staff, the tight end room is as strong as it's been. And I've talked about that. I think a lot of people have discussed that. I've talked with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, over on our weekly Tuesday show over on his Iowa channel about the tight end room. And I was a little bit hesitant earlier in the year to conclude that they were just going to get better. I had a hard time seeing Iowa get better at that position after losing a guy in Sam Laporta who appears like he's going to be the starter with the Detroit Lions. You just have a hard time contemplating how that room could get better. But by all accounts, Luke Lachey is the dude everybody wants him to be. One player told me today that he looks like a guy who should be playing on Sundays. That's a pretty big endorsement for a guy who's never officially started. Of course, Eric All, tremendous upside, athleticism. He was available to the media as well. But lots of praise from Abdul Hodge, the tight ends coach, toward 2 guys, Addison Estringa and Steven Stelianos. Estringa, a second-year guy out of Wisconsin, played a little as a freshman. Now he's a true sophomore. He's taken a big jump. And Steven Stelianos, tough transition period, it sounds like, when he went from Lafayette, which is a lower-level FCS school, to the Big Ten and to Iowa. Sounds like it took a bit of a time period, a gap there for him to get up to speed. Sounds like he's been soaring since spring. That is tremendous news. Abdul Hodge, bullish on the room. He thinks they can go 4 or even 5 deep with Johnny Pascuzzi. I did ask Kirk Ferentz about Iowa playing Hayden Large at fullback at 6'5". Coach Don Patterson and I had an interesting conversation on that during our recent live show, and Don put into question, can Hayden get low enough at 6'5" to block as a fullback at Iowa? And I asked Kirk that question, and Kirk said that is the one challenge for Hayden, is being able to get low enough, but he has shown that so far through 8 practices. And of course, he practiced back during the spring at fullback as well. The other thing that will perk your ears up, and again, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to jump on the bandwagon here, but I will say, by all accounts, a lot of positivity around the offensive line. All right. Not only Logan Jones at center, People have pointed him out on a number of occasions. Several coaches, players pointed him out today. Talked with George Barnett, the third-year offensive line coach, and he talked about the progression of this room. And one thing he talked about is the level of competition throughout the room that he simply hasn't had since taking over post-COVID. That is music to the ears of Iowa fans. And I think they've got 8 or 9 guys right now who, by all accounts, are pretty healthy. I'm sure there's some soft tissue stuff going on. But Logan Jones apparently has been really, really impressive. And Mason Richmond is locked in at left tackle. That's one thing that George Barnett basically acknowledged. You've got the 2 other guard spots still up for grabs. I had a conversation with Dejon Parker. He was really impressive interviewing him today. And it does sound like Nick DeYoung, who is listed on the depth chart at left guard, is working exclusively at right guard and at right tackle. So that shows you how little stock to put into that depth chart preseason. One other name that got brought up several times is Seth Anderson. I still have a lot of questions about the wide receiver room. Kirk was quick to pull the brakes on Caleb Brown, reminding everybody in the media, look, the guy's got one catch in his college career. Obviously was highly recruited and is really talented and has flashed, but was quick to acknowledge the lack of experience from Caleb. It did sound to me like maybe Seth Anderson is a step ahead of Caleb Johnson as far as progression. Now, Seth has played and had more production at an FCS school, but I think Seth Anderson is set to make a splash this year. Still a lot of question marks for me at wide receiver. The linebackers seem strong. Ton of praise for Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. Talked to both of those guys. They were both as impressive as you would think. Kirk did bring up depth, and he's got some concerns about depth there. After Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, and Kyler Fisher, you wonder where they turn. It sounds like Carson Shire, who is the heir apparent at one of those positions, is out right now with an injury. Don't think it's going to be long-term. It sounded like Kirk expects him back next week, but depth is a question mark at linebacker. I asked several people, including some players, hey, what's the strength of this defense? Is it the defensive line like it looks? And that was the response. Yes, it's the trenches. We feel like we can win inside, and that's, again, music to the ears of Iowa fans. And finally, the last note I wanted to throw out there, and I'll be posting video content really throughout the next few days and weeks from our visit to Iowa Media Day today. But one final note, I had a very interesting interaction with Coach Brian Ferentz. And I won't go into grave detail, but I'll like to share that with everybody on this channel. I'll try to post that maybe later today or tomorrow. It was just an interesting interaction. And I approached Brian Ferentz on the subject of waste downs and Iowa not really utilizing waste downs. I'll just be anxious to get your thoughts. I will be live for a live stream following Kids Day. Again, the open scrimmage tomorrow at Kinnick Stadium. I'll be live for a show later that day. Time TBA. Stay tuned here to the channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm for details. Click that little bell for notifications so you know when we're going live. It'll be a call-in style of show. I'll also be recording a podcast with a good friend, Tom Caker from on3.com, HawkeyeReport.com. So stay tuned for that. We'll be talking about reaction from the weekend that was with Mark Rogers next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. And again, plenty of video content. We'll have interviews from the players, interviews from the coaches throughout the days and weeks ahead. Not a time to fall asleep, folks. Time to subscribe, turn notifications on right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll talk to you very, very soon.